I met my husband's first love on the day of the final funding pitch. She walked into the conference room like she already owned it. And she did. Because the lead investor was my husband. My name is Cora, and I am the founder of a biotech startup called Synapse. We developed a non-invasive neural interface for patients with spinal cord injuries. It was my life's work. 10 years of research. 4 years of clinical trials. 2 years of begging venture capitalists to believe in a woman who spoke in equations instead of charm. And in the final round of Series B funding, the decision came down to one man. Julian Ashford, CEO of Ashford Capital. My husband of 6 years. And the man who had spent the last decade of his life in love with someone else. I learned about the funding decision 3 days before the pitch. My CTO, Rena, burst into my office with her tablet clutched to her chest. Her face was the color of the lab coats we wore during contamination protocols. Cora, she said. Tell me I'm reading this wrong. She turned the screen toward me. The lead investor from Ashford Capital was listed as Julian Ashford. Below his name was a note from the due diligence team. Recommendation pending consultation with special advisor. The special advisor was Dr. Margot Voss. Margot was Julian's first love. She was also my stepsister. She was also the reason I had not spoken to my father in 11 years. I stared at the screen for a long time. I did not cry. I did not throw anything. I simply opened my calendar and confirmed the pitch meeting for Thursday at 10 a.m. Rena was still standing in my doorway. Cora, she said again. Her voice was quieter now. Are we going to lose this? I looked at her. Probably, I said. But we are going to lose it standing up. The history between Margot and me was not a simple story of rivalry. It was a story of theft. When I was 16, my mother died of a neurodegenerative disease that ate her mind before it ate her body. She forgot my name first. Then my face. Then how to swallow. My father waited exactly 8 months before marrying his former research partner, Dr. Elaine Voss. Elaine had a daughter named Margot. Margot was brilliant. Margot was charming. Margot had the kind of effortless charisma that made people lean toward her like plants toward sunlight. She also wanted everything I had. My father's attention came first. She studied his habits and mirrored his interests. Within a year, she was calling him Dad, while I still called him by his first name. My academic reputation came next. We were both in the same neuroscience track at the same university. She copied my thesis proposal and submitted hers 2 days before mine. The review board accused me of plagiarism. It took me 8 months to clear my name. And then she took Julian. Except Julian was never mine to begin with. He was Margot's boyfriend for 3 years in graduate school. They broke up when she left for a fellowship in Zurich. She wanted him to follow her. He wanted to build his venture capital firm in Boston. They fought for 6 months. She called off the engagement. He spent the next 2 years in a quiet devastation that I mistook for availability. I met him at a biotech conference in San Francisco. He was standing alone near the coffee station, staring at a presentation board about neural mapping. I asked him if he was lost. He said he had been lost for a while. We started talking. We did not stop for 4 hours. He was brilliant and sad, and he looked at me like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. I mistook that for love. I am a scientist. I should have known better than to confuse interest with affection. We married 2 years later. The wedding was small. My father attended with Elaine. Margot was in Zurich and sent a card that said, "Congratulations on your acquisition." Julian laughed when he read it. He said she always had a strange sense of humor. I did not laugh. I knew Margot did not make jokes. She made predictions. The first 3 years of our marriage were functional. We were both building our careers. He was scaling Ashford Capital. I was launching Synapse. We shared a calendar and a mortgage and occasionally a meal. We did not share a bed for the last 18 months. He said he had trouble sleeping. He said he needed space. He said a lot of things that I accepted because I was too busy to examine them closely. Then Margot moved back from Zurich. She joined Ashford Capital as a senior advisor in the biotech division. Julian told me about it over dinner. He was cutting his steak into precise geometric pieces. "Margot is back," he said. His voice was too casual, like he was commenting on the weather. "She is going to consult on our healthcare portfolio." I set down my fork. "Did you ask me before hiring her?" I said. He looked up. His expression was a perfect mask of neutrality. "It is a business decision, Cora. She has the best credentials in the field." I did not argue. I had learned by then that arguing with Julian was like arguing with a spreadsheet. He had already calculated the optimal outcome. My feelings were not a variable he included in his models. The next 6 months were a slow erosion. Margot began appearing at events she had no reason to attend. She was at the Ashford Holiday Gala wearing a dress the color of champagne. She spent the entire evening with her hand on Julian's arm. I stood across the room watching my husband laugh at her jokes. His laugh was different with her. It was looser. Younger. Like a man who had put down a heavy weight. When I approached them, Margot smiled at me with the warmth of a snake sunning itself on a rock. "Cora," she said, "you look so professional tonight." It was not a compliment. It was a classification. She was the one he loved. I was the one he married. The distinction was subtle but absolute. The announcement of the Ashford Capital investment in our Series B round came 3 weeks before the pitch meeting. Julian's firm was leading a $50 million round. My startup needed that money to begin Phase 3 trials. Without it, Synapse would have to lay off half our staff and delay our FDA submission by at least 2 years. I knew the moment I saw the investor list that Margot would find a way to interfere. She was the special advisor on the deal. She would review all proposals. She would make a recommendation. And Julian would listen to her. Not because she was his first love, but because she was genuinely exceptional at what she did. That was the worst part. Margot was not a villain who succeeded through manipulation alone. She was brilliant. Her credentials were real. Her analysis was sharp. She simply used her brilliance as a weapon instead of a tool. The pitch meeting was held in the main conference room at Ashford Capital's headquarters. The building was all glass and steel. It looked like a cathedral built to worship money. I arrived with Rena and my lead engineer Marcus. We were wearing our best professional armor. Dark suits. Neutral expressions. The uniform of people who were trying not to show how much they had to lose. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston Harbor. The light was harsh and white. It made everyone look slightly exposed. The Ashford team was already seated. 5 people in identical ergonomic chairs. Julian was at the head of the table. Margot was at his right hand. She was wearing a slate gray blazer that matched Julian's tie. I noticed this detail immediately. I noticed everything. It was my gift and my curse. I could read a room the way I read a data set. Every variable accounted for. Every signal analyzed. And every signal in that room told me I was going to lose. Julian opened the meeting with formal remarks. He did not look at me. He looked at the projector screen behind my head. His voice was the same voice he used on earnings calls. Smooth. Measured. Completely devoid of human warmth. "We are excited to hear from Synapse today," he said. Their technology represents a significant advancement in neural interface design. The words were correct, but the delivery was wrong. He was reading from a script. He was not present. Margot, on the other hand, was extremely present. She leaned forward slightly when I began my presentation. Her eyes tracked every slide. She took notes on a tablet with a stylus that clicked softly each time she tapped the screen. I walked through our clinical data. I explained our manufacturing timeline. I projected our market penetration estimates. I did everything right. Every answer was precise. Every projection was conservative. Every risk was acknowledged and mitigated. When I finished, there was a long silence. Margot set down her stylus. She smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had spotted a limp in the herd. "Thank you, Dr. Ashford," she said, using my married name like a tiny needle. "Your presentation was very thorough. But I have a few concerns about your FDA pathway." Her concerns were reasonable. They were specific. They were the kind of concerns that sounded like helpful scrutiny, but were actually designed to plant doubt. She questioned our patient selection criteria. She questioned our endpoint definitions. She questioned our statistical power calculations. Every question was valid. Every question was answerable. But the cumulative effect was a portrait of a company that was not quite ready. Not quite safe. Not quite worth the risk. I answered every question calmly. I cited studies. I referenced regulatory precedents. I did not become defensive. I did not show weakness. But I knew it did not matter. The decision had already been made. After the meeting, Julian walked me to the elevator. He was stiff and formal. His hands were in his pockets. "You did well in there," he said. I looked at him. "Did I?" He did not meet my eyes. "The committee will deliberate. We will have an answer by the end of the week." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. "Julian," I said. He looked up. "Does Margot know you still keep her photo in your desk drawer?" The doors closed before I could see his reaction. 3 days later, the rejection came. Ashford Capital would not be leading our Series B. The official reason was concerns about clinical trial design. The unofficial reason was sitting in the office next to Julian's. Her name was printed on the rejection letter as the lead reviewer. Margot Voss, Ph.D. Chief Biotech Advisor. Rena was devastated. Marcus was furious. I was neither. I sat in my office and stared at the rejection letter for 37 minutes. I counted. Then I opened my personal email and began typing a message to Julian. Subject tonight. Body, we need to talk. He responded within 60 seconds. I'll be home by 7. I arrived at our house at 6:45. The house was a restored Victorian in Cambridge. I had chosen it because it had good light. Julian had agreed to it because it was a sound investment. We had lived there for 5 years. It still did not feel like mine. Julian was already in the living room when I arrived. He was sitting on the couch with a glass of whiskey. He was not drinking it. He was just holding it. Like a prop in a scene, he was trying to remember how to perform. He stood when I entered. "Cora," he said. His voice was different from the meeting. It was smaller. Less certain. I did not sit down. I stood in the center of the room with my coat still on. "I want a divorce," I said. The words landed in the space between us like a stone dropping into still water. The ripples spread outward in silence. Julian's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Confusion. Disbelief. Then a flash of something that looked like terror. What he said. His voice cracked on the single syllable. "You heard me. Cora, this is about the funding. we can appeal the decision. I can talk to the committee. It is not about the funding, I said. It is about the fact that I have spent 6 years married to a man who has never once looked at me the way he looks at her. Julian set down his whiskey glass. His hand was shaking slightly. That is not fair, he said. Margot is a colleague. She is my advisor. She was my past. You are my wife. I pulled out my phone. I opened my photo gallery. I turned the screen toward him. Last month, I said. Margot posted a photo of the two of you at the Ashford retreat. You were standing by a lake. She was leaning her head on your shoulder. The caption said, "Some views never get old." Julian stared at the photo. The color drained from his face. That was she was upset about a deal. I was comforting her. You were smiling, I said. You never smile in photos with me. I scrolled to another image. This was a screenshot of Margot's private Instagram story. It showed a dinner table set for two. Expensive wine. Candlelight. A man's hand visible in the corner of the frame. The hand was wearing a watch. The watch was a Patek Philippe. I had given Julian that watch on our 3rd anniversary. The caption said, "Grateful for late-night strategy sessions with my favorite CEO." Julian opened his mouth. Cora, I can explain. There is nothing to explain, I said. I am not angry about the affair. I am not even sure it is an affair in the traditional sense. I think it is worse than that. I think she is your emotional home. I think I have been a tenant in your life, paying rent with my patience and my ambition and my willingness to accept half of a man. She never had to pay anything. She just walked back in and you handed her the keys. Julian sank back onto the couch. He looked like a building that had just had its foundation removed. I did not sleep with her, he said quietly. I never slept with her. But I did not stop her from acting like she owned me. I did not correct the rumors. I did not defend you. I let the world believe she was my partner because some part of me still thought of her that way. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I am sorry, Cora. I am so sorry. I nodded slowly. I believe you, I said. And I accept your apology. But I am still leaving. I moved out the next morning. I rented a furnished apartment in Somerville. It was small and beige and entirely unremarkable. It was the first space I had ever lived in that felt like mine. Rena helped me carry boxes. She did not ask questions. She just showed up with coffee and packing tape. Marcus sent me a text that said I never liked that guy anyway. I laughed for the first time in weeks. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly simple. We had a prenuptial agreement that separated our assets cleanly. Julian did not contest anything. He signed every document I sent him within 24 hours. His lawyer called my lawyer and said Mr. Ashford wants to make this as painless as possible for Dr. Keene. I had already changed my name back. I was no longer Cora Ashford. I was Dr. Cora Keene. The name my mother gave me. The name I had built my career on before I traded it for a ring. 6 weeks after I moved out, I received an unexpected email. It was from a venture capital firm called Meridian Ventures. Their founder wanted to meet with me. The founder's name was Elena Vasquez. She was a legend in the biotech investment world. She had built Meridian from a 2-person operation into a firm that rivaled Ashford Capital. She had also publicly criticized Julian's investment strategy at a conference the previous year. I admired her from a distance for a very long time. Now she was sitting across from me in a coffee shop in Kendall Square. She was in her mid-50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Keene, she said. I read your clinical trial data. I read your pitch deck. I read the rejection letter Ashford Capital sent you. She took a sip of black coffee. I think Margot Voss is a fool. And I think Julian Ashford is a coward. And I think your neural interface is the most promising technology I have seen in 15 years. Meridian Ventures would like to lead your Series B. We are offering $65 million. I sat very still. The coffee shop hummed around us. Students typing on laptops. Baristas calling out orders. The ordinary noise of an ordinary day. And in the middle of that ordinariness, my entire life shifted on its axis. Why, I asked. Elena smiled. It was a sharp, knowing smile. Because I know what it is like to be underestimated by men who mistake their comfort for competence. And because I read your supplementary materials, the ones Ashford Capital never included in their review. I froze. I had not sent supplementary materials to anyone. What supplementary materials? I asked. Elena opened her tablet and turned it toward me. On the screen was a document I had never seen before. It was a 40-page addendum to my original pitch deck. Pages of additional data. Safety analyses. Long-term efficacy projections. Patient testimonials. All of it formatted perfectly in my team's template. All of it written in a voice that sounded like mine but was not mine. What is this? I whispered. Elena raised an eyebrow. You did not send this. No. Then someone on your team sent it on your behalf. Someone who wanted the truth to get out. I stared at the document. My eyes scanned the text. It took me about 15 seconds to recognize the writing style. The precise sentence structures. The way the data was framed. It was written by someone with deep technical knowledge. Someone who understood our protocol intimately. Someone who had access to our raw data files. Someone named Rena. I called her from the sidewalk outside the coffee shop. I'm not mad, I said before she could speak. But explain. She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I was there when Margot tore your proposal apart. I watched her twist every fact to make you look incompetent. I watched your husband sit there and let it happen. She paused. So I compiled every piece of supporting data we had. Every backup analysis. Every patient outcome. I formatted it as a formal addendum and sent it to 6 competing firms. I figured one of them would actually read it. Elena called me within 2 hours. She asked questions for 4 hours. She knew more about our technology than the Ashford team bothered to learn in 3 months. I leaned against the cold brick wall of the coffee shop. The winter air was sharp in my lungs. You could have told me, I said. You would have told me not to do it, Rena said. And you would have been right because it was reckless and inappropriate and unprofessional. But it was also the right thing to do. And I would do it again. 3 months later, Synapse closed a $70 million Series B round led by Meridian Ventures. Elena joined our board. Rena was promoted to Chief Scientific Officer. We expanded our team from 18 people to 42. We accelerated our FDA timeline. We began planning for a Series C. Margot's prediction had been wrong. She thought she was destroying my company. She was actually giving me the fuel I needed to build something better. Because rejection from Ashford Capital meant I was free to partner with Meridian. And Meridian did not just bring money. They brought strategic connections. They brought regulatory expertise. They brought Elena Vasquez, who introduced me to the board of a major hospital network. That introduction led to a pilot program. That pilot program led to a partnership. That partnership led to something even I had not predicted. Within 8 months, Synapse was bidding for a contract with the Department of Veterans Affairs. It was a $100 million initiative to provide neural interface technology for veterans with spinal cord injuries. It was the largest contract our industry had ever seen. The final decision would be made at a closed-door pitch in Washington, D.C. And the only other company in the running was backed by Ashford Capital. The night before the D.C. pitch, I was in my hotel room reviewing my presentation for the 12th time. Rena was on the couch eating takeout pad thai. Marcus was on the floor surrounded by printed copies of our regulatory documentation. We were exhausted. We were terrified. We were ready. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. I know you are in D.C. tomorrow. Can we talk before the pitch? I did not respond. The phone buzzed again. Please, Cora. 5 minutes. That is all I'm asking. I typed back one word. No. The VA pitch was held in a windowless conference room in a government building that smelled like floor wax and old coffee. The panel consisted of 7 people. 4 doctors. 2 procurement officers. 1 retired general. They were not the kind of audience you could charm with slick slides and emotional appeals. They asked hard questions. They demanded data. They did not smile. I presented for 45 minutes. I answered every question with precision. I did not embellish. I did not evade. When I finished, the general looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. A single economical gesture. It was the most meaningful approval I had ever received. The Ashford-backed company presented after us. Their representative was Margot. She had transitioned from advisor to interim CEO of the competing startup. It was a calculated move. She knew the technology. She knew the market. She knew how to present. But she did not know one thing. The general was a man who valued humility. And Margot had none. I heard later from someone on the panel that she spent the first 10 minutes of her presentation explaining why her company was superior to ours. She named me specifically. She referenced my divorce. She suggested that my personal instability was a liability for a project of this magnitude. The general interrupted her. Dr. Voss, he said. I have reviewed Dr. Keene's clinical data. I have reviewed her manufacturing timeline. I have reviewed her patient outcomes. I am not interested in your analysis of her personal life. I am interested in whether your technology works. Margot faltered. She tried to recover. But the damage was done. She had revealed her hand. And it was not a strong hand. It was a desperate one. The VA announced their decision 4 weeks later. Synapse had won the contract. All $100 million of it. Rena cried. Marcus screamed into a pillow. I sat at my desk and let the news wash over me. I thought about my mother. She had died of a disease that took her mind piece by piece. She would never know what I had built. But some part of me believed she would have been proud. Not of the money. Not of the recognition. But of the fact that I had not given up. That I had taken every wound and turned it into scar tissue. That I had refused to be a footnote in someone else's story. The celebration party was held at the Synapse office. We had expanded into a larger space by then. A converted warehouse in the Seaport district with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. Our entire team was there. 42 people who had believed in this vision when the world told us we were too small. Too risky. Too female-led. Too many things that were not actually obstacles but excuses. Elena gave a toast. She raised a glass of champagne and said, to Cora, who lost a husband and gained an empire. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It felt good. It felt earned. At 10 o'clock that night, a courier arrived at the office. He was carrying a package. It was a small box wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Rena handed it to me. I opened it at my desk. Inside was a leather-bound journal. The cover was embossed with a single word. Sorry. I opened the journal. It was filled with handwritten pages. Julian's handwriting. Page after page of apologies. Explanations. Memories. Regrets. He had written about every moment of our marriage that he had taken for granted. Every conversation he had avoided. Every time he had chosen Margot's comfort over my dignity. The last page was dated the day of the VA announcement. It said, I watched your presentation. I saw the general nod. I knew in that moment that you had won something I will never have. You won the right to be known for who you are. Not who you married. Not who you lost. Just you. I am so proud of you, Cora. And I am so ashamed that it took me this long to see what was always in front of me. I closed the journal. I set it on my desk. I did not cry. I did not call him. I did not forgive him. But I did not throw the journal away either. I kept it. Not as a gesture of reconciliation, but as a piece of evidence. A document proving that my pain had been real. That my struggle had been seen. That I was not invisible after all. 6 months after the VA contract was signed, I was invited to speak at a major biotech conference in San Francisco. It was the same conference where I had met Julian 9 years earlier. I almost did not go. But Elena convinced me. You are not the same woman who met him there, she said. You need to go back and rewrite the ending. So I went. I gave the keynote address. I stood on a stage in front of 2,000 people and talked about neural interfaces and clinical trials and the future of medicine. I did not mention my divorce. I did not mention Margot. I mentioned my mother. I mentioned my team. I mentioned the veterans who would walk again because of our technology. When the speech ended, the audience stood and applauded. It was a long applause. The kind that fills a room and makes the air feel electric. I stood in the center of the stage and let it happen. I did not shrink. I did not deflect. I received it. After the speech, there was a reception. I was standing near the window looking out at the Bay Bridge when I saw him. Julian was across the room. He was alone. He was not wearing his wedding ring. He looked older. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had spent a long time learning lessons he should have learned years ago. He saw me. He did not approach. He just stood there, his hands at his sides, his expression unreadable. I looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then I turned back to the window. A moment later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him. I know I have no right to be here. I just wanted to see you succeed in person. You were magnificent. I typed back. I know. Then I blocked his number. That was 2 years ago. Synapse is now valued at just under $1 billion. Our neural interface has been implanted in over 3,000 patients. The VA contract expanded to $200 million. We are opening a second research facility in Boston. Rena is my co-CEO. Marcus is our Chief Technology Officer. Elena sits on our board and occasionally brings me homemade empanadas. My father sends me an email every year on my birthday. I do not reply. Margot was quietly removed from her position at Ashford Capital. The startup she was leading lost the VA contract and then lost their Series C. She moved to a smaller firm in the Midwest. I do not keep track of her. I do not need to. Julian stepped down as CEO of Ashford Capital last year. He wrote a public letter about the failure of leadership and the importance of integrity. He did not mention me by name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. I do not miss him. I do not wish him ill. I just do not think about him anymore. Or rather, I think about him the way I think about an old scar. It is there. It shaped me. But it does not define me. I am 40 years old now. I live in a loft apartment in the Seaport District. It has floor-to-ceiling windows and a kitchen island that I use for meal prep and late-night research reading. I have a dog named Synapse. Rena named her. She said it was ridiculous. I said it was perfect. I am not dating anyone. I am not opposed to it. But I am also not searching. For the first time in my life, my existence is not defined by a man's absence or presence. I am simply myself. Dr. Cora Keene. Founder. Scientist. Survivor. And if there is a moral to my story, it is not that I won and Margot lost. It is not that Julian realized his mistake. It is not that success is the best revenge. The moral is that I was always capable of building this life. I just had to stop waiting for permission. Permission he was never going to give. Permission I did not actually need. I was born with a mind that sees the world in patterns and data and possibility. For a long time, I let someone else dictate what those patterns meant. I let them define my value. I let them set my ceiling. I do not do that anymore. The ceiling is gone. And so is he. And I am still here. Still building. Still learning. Still healing. And that, more than any contract or valuation or standing ovation. That is what I am most proud of. One last thing. A month ago, I received a package in the mail. It was a small box. Inside was a first edition of a neuroscience textbook I had wanted when I was in graduate school. It was expensive and rare. There was no note. There was no return address. But I recognized the handwriting on the shipping label. It was Julian's. I held the book for a long time. Then I placed it on my bookshelf. Not as a gesture of acceptance, but as a reminder. Some people spend their whole lives trying to make up for what they broke. And some things, once broken, do not need to be fixed. They just need to be left in peace.